Welcome to this episode of Recitals. This is for the month of December and we are discussing social issues. The themes we are discussing today will be education, health, women and economy. These are the topics we are discussing today. And first, let us discuss migration trends in India. As you know, a very large number of people in the country continuously migrate for a variety of reasons. And this data is generally captured in the census. But since the last census was done in 2011, we've not had a census after that. We have had a COVID disruption, and after that, the process is still on. However, recently there was a paper titled 400 Million Dreams. This is a paper by the Economic Advisory Council, which advises the Prime Minister of the country. And this paper shed light on the evolving migration trends in the country. Okay, and the methodology they've used is quite different. We will also talk about that, how valid that methodology is, and we'll also see how migration is happening in the country. Also, we'll briefly touch on what are the different types of migration and what are the factors that actually lead to migration. Okay, now what are the primary migration trends in the country? If you look at that, we see that there are a few changes. Now, what are the top destinations for migrations? Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh remain prominent destinations, while West Bengal and Rajasthan are new entrants, which have replaced Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. So, Andhra Pradesh and Bihar don't seem to be so much so much of a destination for migrants. However, West Bengal, Rajasthan, and Karnataka show the highest growth in incoming migrants. Overall, there's a decline in migration. The report notes that 11.78% reduction in the overall number of migrants since the 2011 census. Like I said, 2011 census is the last census. After that, we have not had a census. So from that, there is a fall in migration. Okay, and this has been attributed to improved economic opportunities in smaller cities, and thereby which meant that there is a reduced need to travel more. Now, if we see overall, what is the methodology that has been used is, we have the ESC paper try to look at the sale of tickets, unreserved tickets, because those are the primary modes of transport for people who are seeking to be migrants. Sale of unreserved tickets, the use of bank remittances, and the use of mobile connectivity. So these three have been the data points on the basis of which this paper has made these claims. Now, what they're saying is that in 2023, there's 11.78% lower sale of tickets, and because of that, they're saying 11.78% lower migrants are there in the country. So in 2011, it was 45.57%. In 2023, they're saying it is 40.2%. Now, like I said, 2011 is the census data, and 2023 is an estimate. However, if you look at it, this is a very big number, 45.57% in a country of about, say, in 2011, we were probably about 120 crores, something like that. So, about 1/3 of the country was continuously migrating in terms of primarily for work. Now, the hypothesis of this report is that lower migration is due to improved public services and economic opportunities. This is a very, very big claim to make. Now, the telecom data suggests that April to June is the highest period of movement, along with November and December emerging as the second highest period of migration. Now, the migration rates, if you see, have fallen according to this data. Now, there are a few caveats we should always look at whether the use of this data is actually valid. Now, if you see these two periods, we have to first see whether they're tallying with any of the major festivals. For example, if we follow the lunar calendar in the country for the celebration of our festivals, and these are solar calendar based ideas, so the festivals are always shifting in our country, because let us say Chhath Puja, for example, at that period of time, there's a very large number of people who migrate back to their villages. Or there's a two-way movement. There's a higher number of sale of tickets. Can we make this assumption based on that? We cannot. Hopefully, the report has taken care of that. And the other thing is, there is another reason for which people might not be migrating to cities. The cities themselves might have a very large number of unemployed people. If the cities have more people than they need, then new migrants coming into the city cannot find jobs. So there is no longer a space in the city for migrants to come and find jobs. So this is equally important. It might not be just that improved economic opportunities are there in the smaller cities. It might also be that cities, the larger metropolitan cities have fewer economic opportunities. That also must be considered. Now, if we see over the past 10 years, the growth in the manufacturing sector across the country has been a mere 1.4. If we see manufacturing growth, manufacturing has grown by 1.4% over a period of 10 years. If we put this with this hypothesis, the hypothesis looks very shaky. Now, only when there is growth are more people needed in the cities to fulfill the roles that the growth has created. If the growth is like 0.14% per year, that is nothing. So if we have very little growth of 1.4% per year, there isn't enough growth in a city to allow people to migrate into the city and find jobs. So that part of the hypothesis looks a little shaky. Okay, now, but let us carry on with the discussion and see what other things are there in the report. Now, if you see what are the top routes that people are taking for migration, the top state-to-state route is Uttar Pradesh to Delhi, Gujarat to Maharashtra, Telangana to Andhra Pradesh, Bihar to Delhi, Bihar to West Bengal. What are the top destination districts for migrants? Mumbai, Bengaluru urban, Howrah, Central Delhi and Hyderabad. Emerging origin districts from where people are actually buying tickets: Villupuram in Tamil Nadu, Sahasra in Bihar, Muradabad in Uttar Pradesh and Murshidabad in West Bengal. Now this is where it's very interesting. If you see Telangana to Andhra Pradesh, people are migrating, but the destination is Hyderabad. Hyderabad is in Telangana. And the other problem with this is Telangana has a better economy than Andhra Pradesh. So why are people migrating? So there seems to be a few points that need further consideration in this in the claims that have been made in this report. Okay. Now, what are the hotspots for migration? This is old data. If you see, Delhi is one of the primary places. From these are the places from where whatever you are seeing in bright red, deep maroonish color, those are the places from where people are migrating. Okay, and people are migrating to Bombay, Mumbai, Bengaluru. Some of them are Gulf bound in Kerala, and then you have Delhi as a destination. Okay. Now, the latest government data on migration, like I said, the old data, the actual valid expansive data that we have comes from 2011 census. Now, India had 38% of the population, according to 2011 census, were migrating. That's more than 1/3 of the country. Between 2001 and 2011, population grew by 18%. Number of migrants increased by 45%. This is all again 2011 census we're talking about, 2011 census data that we're talking about. Now, 21 crore people were rural to rural migrants, which is to say they went from one rural area in the country to another rural area in the country. Important to remember that migration is not always simply from villages to cities or smaller towns to cities. It's a lot more complex. It can be within the state, it can be within states, it can be within the similar geographic regions. So it's a lot more complex. 54% of classifiable internal migration was basically, more than half was basically rural to rural migrants. Now, intrastate movement accounted for 88% of all internal movements, migrants. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar were the largest sources of interstate migration. Maharashtra and Delhi were the largest receiver states. So people were largely going to Maharashtra or Delhi. Basically, either they were going to Bombay or they were going to Delhi, because that's where the opportunities were. But this is old data we're talking about. Majority of interstate migration was due to reasons of marriage and family. So many times people would get married, they'd be able to bring their wives to home, to their places in Delhi or Bombay or Howrah or Calcutta, wherever they've migrated, because those are the major destinations. And generally we have to understand that it's not like somebody comes to a city and immediately they can afford to have their family there. It's a slow, gradual process. Internal, now what are the kinds of migration that we talk of? When we talk of migration, it's important to understand what types of migrations are there actually. One is an internal migration. It's like from one place to another within the country, for example. Now there is another one called forced migration, where people are forced out of their homes, say due to conflict or due to war or due to a variety of environmental reasons. Maybe somewhere there's a drought, so people are forced out of there. Now there is temporary migration. This is also called seasonal or temporary work. So when during, let us say, the lean seasons in agriculture, people migrate to other places, find work, and when the agriculture season starts, they go back to their villages or to their agricultural farms, and then they continue doing this. So this is basically seasonal or temporary migration. The people who migrate like this are not looking to permanently settle down anywhere because they have to go back home. Now the other one is reverse migration. Refers to migration of people who have previously migrated to a place. After a few years, they go back to their original place from which they have come. That is called reverse migration. Now, there is another important concept that you should remember. It's called circular migration. Okay, this is also an important concept. Now, generally what happens in circular migration is, this happens even globally, and this is an upcoming topic and it's quite important. Circular migration is when people, they find work somewhere, then they'll start at point A, let us say point A to point B, then they go back, and then this cycle continues, or sometimes there's even a point C and they'll go back. So basically, it's again basically based on the kind of opportunities that are there. Now, circular migration, the biggest advantage for the countries or places that receive migrants is there's not continuous pressure on them to provide facilities or civic infrastructure or something. They actually come, add value to the economy, and then go back. So a lot of European countries actually encourage this kind of migration. And for example, Germany has benefited tremendously from this. Many countries have actually run pilot programs for actually circular migration as well. Now, since we are talking about a report that has come out, and we saw the highlights of the report, let us see what are the factors that actually lead to migration and see whether the claims of the report tally with this. Okay. Now, when we talk of, there are economic factors always. Now, this is the primary way in which migration is understood. We talk about push factors, adverse economic conditions which are pushing people out of their homes, out of their villages. Let us say farms have been destroyed by drought, or there are floods or anything like that. These are push factors. Now, there are pull factors. Pull factors is the opportunities in a different area are a lot more attractive to people. Let us say somebody is earning 100 rupees in a village. Maybe in a city they can make 500 rupees. So that is a pull factor. The city pulls people because it offers a better chance at life. Then there is also something called pushback factors. This is what I was referring to at the beginning of the discussion. When the urban labor is sizable and there is unemployment rates are high, two factors that are actually present in the country right now, they push the migrants out back into the villages because the city cannot sustain these people anymore. Now, these two factors are right now at work in India. We are seeing high unemployment rates, about which a lot is being written and spoken about, and the government is continuously trying to find solutions for this. But there are a lot of factors that are not really in the control of the government. Now, the urban labor force is also sizable. There are many people. I mean, people have been migrating over decades into cities, and the cities are actually bursting at the seams. Cities have grown manifold. There are many suburban areas that have become part of the city. For example, there was just Delhi. Now you have the NCR, which has like Noida, Gurgaon, and Faridabad and Ghaziabad. All these become part of the city because of the growth. All that is part of your urban labor force. Now, for a village migrant or other person, somebody to come from a different city, they have to compete with this labor. There's already a sizable labor. So that part of it becomes a problem when we talk about these factors. Okay. Now, there are socio-cultural factors when we talk of migration. One, we have migration can be due to marriage. A person gets married, generally the bride shifts to the husband's place. Now, this is the commonest form of migration in our country because of our cultural norms, where the bride goes and joins the husband's household. And mostly this is the intrastate migration that we are talking about. Largely it is due to this one cultural factor. Now, the second reason, socio-cultural factor, would be caste. Sometimes there is caste violence because of which people are pushed out of certain villages. So villages become extremely difficult, or certain parts of the city become difficult. So because of that, then we have religion, religious divides, religious conflicts can push people out of certain areas. And we are seeing a lot of religious conflict for a variety of reasons. That again becomes a factor for migration. For example, Jammu and Kashmir has seen 7 waves of migration. Many of this, and 89 onwards, this has been largely due to religious reasons. So religious conflict can actually be a factor in migration. Then there are cultural factors. To be closer to one's family, to be closer to one's cultural roots. People when they're going back to their villages or they're going back to their towns, it's because they want to be closer to their cultural roots. So cultural factors can also be one of the reasons. Now, there are political factors for migration. When we talk of political factors, we have political instability, persecution, separatist movements, and government policies. For example, a policy like Sons of the Soil can lead to migration. Now, there are environmental factors. We have natural disaster, climate change, deforestation, displacement by development. One of the commonest reasons. These can also lead to migration. Now, coming back to the report that we were discussing, what are the major intrastate movements that we are seeing? Murshidabad-Kolkata route is the most travelled path for general class passengers, reflecting significant intrastate migration within the state of West Bengal. Now, what are the major migration to major urban centers? Delhi is one urban center, Mumbai is the other urban center. Now, what are the source districts? From where are people migrating into Delhi? It's Agra, Patna, Kanpur, Jhansi, and Bareilly. 2 new places have emerged as places of origin for people to come into Delhi. One is Dausa in Rajasthan, the other is Ludhiana. Now, Ludhiana is a very interesting area because Ludhiana earlier was a place to which people migrated because it has a very strong industrial base. So, if people are migrating out of here, it then raises very serious questions about the whole. If you remember, one of the premises of this hypothesis was that smaller places, there are better opportunities available, there has been better development that has happened, because of which people are not migrating anymore. But if people are migrating from Ludhiana, then it raises questions about this basic premise. Now, Mumbai, where are people going to Mumbai from? From Valsad, Surat, Nashik, Ratnagiri, Varanasi, along with Sindhudurg. These are the places from which people are going. Like I said, the methodology that was used was Indian Railways unreserved ticketing data, mobile roaming data, and banking remittances. The premise being that second class in Mail Express and ordinary train is the most affordable way of traveling in this country, which is the route probably poor migrants would take. Now, what are the limitations according to the report itself? There are no demographic details which allow for any kind of clear further detailed analysis. There is no data about age, gender or reasons for migration. Now, all these generally go into the census data. When we analyze census data, it gives a much clearer picture. So, that is missing from this. Data captures station to station travel. So, where did people come from originally? We cannot say. We can only say that from this station to that station people have traveled. The origin station, people must come from nearby villages or nearby areas. That data is not there. Now, these alternative sources were used primarily because COVID disrupted the census taking, and this is what the government has proposed right now. So, this was about a report that has come out by the EAC about, it's called 400 Million Dreams, and tried to understand the migratory trends in the country. But while the methodology is quite clever, there seem to be some basic problems in the way the data has been used, and some of the premises of the data do not stand up to detailed scrutiny, and also there are severe limitations. But however, considering that we don't have any data at all, this is a very clever way of trying to understand a problem for which we have no data. Now, let's discuss WHO Malaria Report 2024. The World Malaria Report has been released by WHO. As per the report, India has made significant progress in reducing malaria in the country in terms of both incidence of malaria and in terms of mortality rates. Now, what are the India specific observation? India exits the HB-HI group, that is to say, we are no longer in the high incidence and high mortality rates, and it's a milestone in malaria control. India successfully reduced what is called the high burden, high impact group of endemic countries, which is to say the number of people who are falling ill and the number of people who are dying, those percentages have fallen in the country. Now, in the country, there is a reduction in 69% of cases from 6.4 million in 2017. In 2023, we are down to just 2 million people, which is still a fairly large number, but considering the size of our population and the fact that the tropical conditions in which we live lead to a higher incidence of the disease, this is a remarkable thing. And malaria deaths fell from 11,100 to 3,500 during the same period. Now, what are the key strategies behind this? How did we achieve this? This is a remarkable thing, because if other countries understand how we have done this, maybe they will be able to do the same thing. Now, artemisinin-based combination therapy, which is called ACT, kills most of the malaria parasites, and additional drugs take care of the other things, remaining parasites. So, that has been used successfully across the country. And long-lasting insecticidal nets have been used across the country, which have resulted in the mosquitoes dying as well as reduction in the number of malaria incidences. There have been targeted interventions carried out by the health authorities, especially efforts have been focused in forested and tribal areas, especially in places like Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh and the northeast. There is improved diagnostics, treatment and access to drugs across these areas and across the country as well over a period of time. Now, there are deployment of new generation insecticides treated nests which have actually offered better protection against malaria. Now, there has also been effective monitoring and case management. Now, if you look at the data of malaria, how malaria has been over the past few years. Now, this is for 2021, I am using it for a reason. There were an estimated 241 million cases across the world in 2020. So, this is from the data that came out in 21, and 95% of the cases were in Africa, and an estimated 627,000 people died in 2020 due to malaria. Now, the latest data shows that there are 263 million malaria cases. So, we had 241 in 2020. It has gone up to 263. So what we have achieved as a country is all the more remarkable, because if the number of cases are going up in the world, the number of cases have actually fallen in our country. That's all the more remarkable. So Nigeria has the maximum number of cases, followed by Democratic Republic of Congo. Again, the kind of geographic and environmental factors at work you can watch, you see that. After that, Uganda, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Tanzania, Angola. These are the main countries. And if you see, India is somewhere here. So we are plonk in the middle, and we still have a distance to cover. It's about 20,38,000 people had malaria in our country. It's about 2,038,000. Now, this is how the world map is in terms of malaria infections for the period we are talking about. So the areas that are in red, there has been at least one indigenous case of malaria, which is to say the disease did not come from a traveler or something like that, but within the country. So you will see that above this line, there is no malaria, sorry. So India is still facing indigenous cases, and 0 indigenous cases you can see. And in the case of countries like Saudi Arabia and China, they don't have any more cases. They have been certified as not having any cases, which is to say when a country doesn't have any malaria case for 3 years continuously, then they are certified as being malaria free. Now, just to wrap up, just to quickly revise a few things about malaria. Now, most of you are aware that malaria is carried by the female Anopheles mosquito, and it carries a parasite called Plasmodium, which is spread by the infected mosquito called Anopheles mosquitoes. And globally in 2023, there were an estimated 263 million cases and about 59,000 malaria deaths in 83 countries. Africa, like I said, has the maximum burden, about 95%. And children under the age of 5 accounted for about 76% of all malaria deaths. Now, in 2021, WHO actually approved the use of vaccinations to prevent malaria. This is a major breakthrough, and the vaccination is called RTS and AS01 malaria vaccine. This was the first one that was approved, and later in 2023, R21, also called Matrix. Wait, let me clean this. R21, also called Matrix M vaccine. So these are the two vaccines that are available right now. These are approved by WHO, and this also should help in reduction of malaria, basically eliminating malaria as a disease. Now, in 2023, 35 countries reported fewer than 1,000 indigenous deaths, indigenous cases of disease, which is actually a higher number because in the previous year there were just 13 countries in 2000. So, malaria seems to be in the past 23 years from 13 countries which had more than 1,000 cases. Now we've gone to 35. So the need for a vaccines couldn't have come at a better time. Now, since 2015, 14 countries have declared as malaria free. So these are things I want you to remember. 23, and then in 2000 there were only 13 countries. Now, for at least 3 years, when a country is not reporting any malaria case, they are given a WHO certification of malaria elimination. Now, 14 countries have been given since 2015. 14 countries have been certified by WHO as having no malaria at all. These are Maldives, Sri Lanka, Kyrgyzstan. Sri Lanka is very impressive considering the kind of climatic conditions they live in. The fact that they become malaria free is actually hugely worth noticing. There is Paraguay, Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is quite strange considering they're not really in the kind of climatic zone that should be having malaria deaths. Then there is Argentina. Then there is Algeria, China, El Salvador, Azerbaijan, Tajikistan, Belize, Cabo Verde, and Egypt. So these are the countries. These are the countries which have been certified by WHO as malaria-free. Sorry, Uzbekistan is all the more understandable considering the climatic condition. They should have never had actually malaria cases at all. Now, what are the global targets that the WHO has set for itself? They're saying by 2030, 90% reduction in malaria cases. That's what the target is. And incidence also they want to reduce by 90%. They want to reduce malaria deaths also by 90%. Now, the other target they have is by 2030, at least 35 countries, they want to reduce, completely eliminate malaria. And preventing resurgence of malaria in countries where it has been free. So the 14 countries and other countries where there is no malaria, they want to make sure that malaria doesn't see a resurgence in these countries. So this is what it is all about. And basically, this is a fairly serious problem considering the number of deaths and the fact that there is a vaccine, there are methods to stop it. And the target, at least from the perspective of India, India should actually become malaria free by 2030. It's not a target that can't be achieved by a country. Now, let's discuss. Center wants states to make snake bites notifiable disease. What is a notifiable disease? Why does the center want snake bites to be called a notifiable disease? Let us discuss this. Now, the Union Ministry of Health has urged states to notify snake bites as a notifiable disease. When you have a notifiable disease, what it effectively means is diseases that can lead to death, fatalities, or outbreaks, or for example, like tuberculosis, HIV, cholera, they are called notifiable diseases. And when it is notified in that fashion, what effectively happens is we start paying more attention to that disease. We monitor it carefully. There is better data collection. There are better efforts at preventing it. So from being something simple like, oh, there's a snake bite, which is happening here and there, we are now saying that let us look at this as a disease. That it is, let us treat it as a notified disease. Let us have active data of this and let us find ways of preventing it. Now let us see why this is necessary and what impact it will have. Okay. Now, basically, like I said, it improves surveillance and provides precise data on the case of deaths. Right now, when we have a death due to snake bites in the country, it is called a medico-legal case. Now, what happens in a medico-legal case is there is a FIR filed and there is a whole investigation that has to be completed. Now, the doctors have to notify the police have to complete the process, and then there is a whole process that is done. Because of which, many times snake bite goes unreported and doctors would say, oh no, this was due to something else, this was due to something else. For example, there was a recently case that went to the courts in Karnataka where a person's wife died of snake bite, and many of the states actually give compensation when there is snake bite, and the person wanted to claim compensation. Now the doctors wrote it as renal failure because depending on the kind of poison that the person has been, kind of snake that has bitten a person, the kind of death that happens can change. And in this case, the ultimate end happened due to renal failure, and the doctors wrote that instead of saying that it's a snake bite. The person went to court, there was a long fight, and finally the compensation was awarded. So this, the government is saying now we will change it completely. And we'll say that even if it's a MLC case, we will have it notified as a disease, and we will have active surveillance, and we will actually have precise data on the deaths and cases. Now, what happens? What are the challenges to treating snake bite in our country? There is delayed or no healthcare access. People immediately go to some Babaji or some quack who, if the person is lucky, will give something which is completely unrelated and the person doesn't die. It's probably because when a snake bites, not every time a snake bites will it inject poison. So where the poison is not injected, the person will survive. That's the only reason they survive in that. When poison has been injected, chances of death are very, very high. There's a lack of training. Healthcare staff often lack adequate training to treat snake bites. There are testing gaps to confirm snake bites are usually unavailable. There is no antivenom in most of the places. And the development of antivenom is also a problem. Why is there no antivenom? Because antivenom is to be stored at a temperature, at controlled temperatures between -5 degrees to -10 degrees. And many times PHCs don't have capacity to actually store antivenom. And there is another very important factor. Whenever a snake bite happens, for the antivenom to be most effective, there must be an antivenom injection given within 10 minutes. So these are the facts, these are the challenges. What happens when a snake bites? There is progressive weakness, that is neuroparalytic attack. There can be neurotoxins, there can be bleeding if it is a vasculotoxic or hemotoxic, depending on the kind of poison. Then can be myotoxic, which can be painful swellings. Now, snake poisons of 3 types. You can have neurological, where the nervous system shuts down. You can have the shutting down of the internal organs, or it can lead to necrotic, wherein the flesh actually starts to die off. Now, what are the symptoms? Progressive painful swelling from the viper, neuroparalytic attack is from a cobra, vascular toxins from Brussels viper, saw scale viper. Depending on the kind of snake that has bitten a person, you have a different impact. Typically, within 32 minutes to 6 hours, there are symptoms that are noticed. Now, how are the snake bites happening in this? India has the highest number of snake bites in the world and the highest number of deaths due to snake bites in the world, which is an alarming statistic. Every year, 58,000 people are bitten by snakes in the country. And if you see, 70% of bites from venomous are from venomous snakes, 30% of non-venomous, and 5% are deadly bites. Chance of dying if you're an Indian due to snake bite is 1 in 250 under the age of 70. Deadly incidents, as you can see on the map, wherever you have, these are the hot spots where there's a higher risk of people dying due to snake bites. Now, there are primarily 4 types of snakes that are venomous. There are about 310 species of snakes in the country, and 66 of them have been classified as being venomous. 4 of them are called the large snakes, due to which the maximum number of deaths happen. So what are the big 4? You have the Indian cobra, you have the saw-scaled viper, Russell's viper, and common krait. Now, these are where they are found in the country. The cobras are found probably all over the country. They're found in forests, grasslands, agricultural lands. Mainly, they're both in the day and the night. And then you have the saw-scaled viper found in both desert areas and dense grasslands. These are mostly night snakes. And you have Russell's viper, which is again mostly found in the nights and largely found in urbanized areas. And you have common krait, which is found in scrub jungles and sandy areas. Again, it's mostly in the nights. Now, we have only a polyvalent venom to neutralize the venom of the 4 big 4. We'll discuss about vaccines in a second. Now, snake bites across the world, if you see, India has the highest percentage of people dying due to snake bites. If you see globally, mortality rates have actually gone up. Global mortality rate was 0.8 deaths per 1 lakh, which represents a 36% decrease in since 1990, which basically shows that there are better testing facilities and better vaccinations available, and vaccination is more easily available. Antivenom is more easily available. Now, coming back to India, globally, there are 5.4 million snakebite cases in every year, and India has about 2.8 million a year. And globally, about 1 lakh people die. In India, like I said, it's about 58,000, but the WHO says it's about 45,900. Now, coming back to India, what the government has suggested is that we'll have a national action plan for prevention and control of snake bite involving, or NAPSC. It's called NAPSC. This is going to be the new plan. Now, recommends that snake bites be a notifiable disease, and the data, like I said, in India is largely problematic. It's not, we know for certain that it's not accurate, primarily because of the MLC angle, that there are medical legal cases involved. So many times underreporting is kind of the norm. Now, there are 23 species that are medically significant. One more thing, there are more than 100 species that have poisonous. Snakes are just one. 100 different kind of species. For example, you have lizards, you have you have insects that are poisonous, you have even plants that are poisonous, and you have spiders that are poisonous, scorpions that are poisonous. But we mostly talk of snakes in our country. Now, the commercially available polyvalent antivenom is effective against the 4 species and covers about 80% of snake bites in the country. Now, the new thinking that we want in the country, the government wants in the country, is to think of snake bite as a disease rather than an incident. Now, how do we make antivenom? The antivenom that comes is mostly coming from snakes that are caught by the Irula tribe. These are people who live in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Kerala. And you must have seen pictures of venom being extracted from snakes. So the way this happens is, snakes are caught, venom is extracted from them, that is diluted, then in slow dosages is given to large animals, mostly horses. Then these animals, after a period of time, are bled. And from their blood, we collect the antibodies that have been released by the animal. These antibodies are then, we again turn them into vaccines. So this is the only way right now in the world to create any kind of antivenom for snakes. You want to cure a snake bite, you want to prevent a death due to a snake bite, way is to basically catch a snake first, extract its venom, poison an animal, extract from that animal mild doses poison a big animal, extract the blood of that animal in small doses, turn it into venom, antivenom, and that antivenom can then prevent the death. Now, the most important to remember is all the venoms that come from each of the snakes is different. It's not like you have one antivenom. It will work for every single kind of snake in the world. It's not so. These are species specific, and which is where the problem is. For example, we have, when we say polyvalent, it means that this is a vaccination that can work for more than one category. Monovalent would mean that only for one snake you have a cobra, you extract a venom of a say cobra, and you make antivenom from that particular cobra. So for that particular species it would work. Now what we do generally is we combine 4 of these together. So in our case it covers about 80%. So that's why we have polyvalent. Now there are major challenges to this problem. The biochemical constituents and the effect of venom from the snakes differs depending on geography. There are minor variations within the same species even, which means that the antivenom that we have may not be very effective. Now the other thing is, within the same snake, depending on the potency of the poison changes with age. For example, Russell's viper, when they are very small snakes, they are very, very, very poisonous. As they grow older, the strength of the poison reduces in the animal. Now the other challenges are, antivenoms themselves can cause reactions, and there are local species such as the branded krait, cobra, green pit viper, northeast, against which commercially available poisons, antivenoms don't work. So many of the cases in Northeast India, we have a problem because what the venom that is being developed in the south, in these 3 states, is not covering the snake bites that are actually happening in the northeast, and that's a big chunk of our country because those are again the geographical factors come into play. Now there are artificial venoms. There is an effort to actually create artificial venoms. However, the research is on for this, and there have been some major breakthroughs. The idea is to develop a venom that would cover a variety of snakes. They're also looking at artificially designed peptides to fight toxins. Now, venom collection, again, there is a problem because these are protected by the Wildlife Protection Act. So, these are some of the problems that we have right now. Now, coming back to the WHO, the position taken by the WHO, what the WHO says is, the WHO is aiming that by 2030 in India, the idea is that we reduce snake bites and death due to snake bite by half. That is what it is. Now, and in WHO in 2017 classified it a neglected tropical disease. So the idea of classifying as a disease stands on very firm footing. It's not a fancy idea somebody had. It actually is a well-studied idea, and there is almost 7 years after the WHO said that this is a neglected tropical disease, we have decided that okay, we are going to classify it as a disease. Now, there are states in the country that actually provide compensation for death in case of poison, death due to snake bites. Madhya Pradesh pays 4 lakhs for each successful snake bite death, and about 231 crores has been given to people in just 2 years. 231 crores has been disbursed to people. And Kerala pays about for compensation for wild animal attacks, including snake bites. And Karnataka pays about 2 lakhs per death due to snake bite. Odisha recently increased it to 6 lakhs. But in India, it's basically a medical legal case where both the police and medical departments both are involved. Now, let us just wrap this up with a little discussion about a few facts about actually vaccination. Albert Camus, a renowned French physician and bacteriologist and immunologist, he was the first person to demonstrate the idea of hyperimmunize an animal, then extract the venom, extract the antibodies from that and treat it. So the method that is used for treating snake bites was developed by Albert Camus, and we are still using the same method. This is more than 100-year-old method. Now recently, Karthik Sunagar, a venom expert at the Indian Institute of Sciences, IIS, created an antibody called 95MAT5. This is very important, please remember this. This is almost a discovery, invention worthy of a Nobel Prize. He partnered with Caswell and Joseph Jardine, and they were experts in protein engineering at Scripps Research, and they have developed, or Karthik Sunagar has developed an anti-venom which can treat about 100 different kinds of venoms. Remember, I said that it's basically one-on-one case. Basically, you have one animal, one particular type of snake, and the antivenom is effective only for that. Or in case we synthesize 3 or 4 together, like in the case of the polyvalent one that we're using, 4 animals, 4 kinds of species. But what Karthik Sunagar has recently discovered is an anti-venom method to treat 100 different kinds of venoms at the same time, and this is called 95MAT5. This is truly a remarkable thing. And probably sometime in the future he should probably be eligible for a Nobel Prize or something like that, because he has completely redone the way something was done for more than 100 years. And this could actually, probably by 2030 we should have 0 deaths if this works out. So please remember the name and the name of the vaccine. And this is what it is. The government has decided to classify it as a disease. And you also understood how the venoms work and how antivenom is. So that's what it is. Now, let us discuss developing national policy to increase female workforce participation. Okay, the government is set to unveil a comprehensive national policy aimed at increasing female labor, focusing on creating an environment. They want to basically create an environment which allows for greater participation of the female workforce in the economic activities. As you must be aware, the female labor participation rates have been continuously falling for the past few decades. And the government is trying to address this problem, because that basically means that 50% of the population is actually not involved at all in any economic activity. So if the country has to grow, all of us must participate in the economic activities of the country. Now, what the government is saying is that we will focus on care economy. Now, there are parts of this that are problematic, but we'll discuss that. But we'll also discuss what the government is actually trying to do. And some of these things are not really based on strong ideas. Okay, so the government is saying that care economy, okay, refers to the sector of economic activity that encompasses taking care of people, basically support services, basically in health, education, child care, elderly, etc. It's like somebody's fallen ill, you take care of that person. That is part of the care economy. Now, care economy is an emerging idea and an emerging topic across the world, because across the world, global populations are aging. We are very quickly getting into that category as a country where we'll have a very large population that has to be taken care of. So that opens up a massive number of jobs for people and economic activity for people. So this is called the care economy. Now, what the government is, and care economy has both paid and unpaid care work, which is basically essential for human survival and welfare and labor force participation. Now, it is also sometimes called hidden care economy. Now, the feminists of the earlier era, they came up with the idea that women do a lot of work at home. They take care of the family, they take care of cooking, they take care of cleaning, they take care of people who are falling ill. And in earlier times, they'd even, like even many places it still happens, they collect firewood, bring it home, they collect water, bring it home. So all these are actually economic activities. The feminists of an earlier generation, what they felt was that this part of a person's life is neglected and not thought of as economic activity. What they were aiming for was basically to say that the gendered roles in a society that have been split in terms of the roles for men and roles for women, both must be recognized and must be interchangeable. This was the heart of the idea. And they said that, which is what you must be hearing of late. People would say that, oh, are you helping your wife at home? Or are you helping your mother at home in cooking? Are you cutting vegetables at home for your mother? Are you cutting vegetables for your wife at home? Things like this, where you say household tasks. Earlier, the roles that were strongly delineated on gender roles now has started to become a little loosely defined, and people have started to share in work. So that part of it was the original idea. Now, that slowly got mutated into something called a hidden care economy, where we started saying, oh, that can be actually monetized. We can put a monetary value on the work you're doing. So from there, it slowly mutates into an idea where where countries start to think that, okay, wait, that can also be economic activity, which actually puts the whole thing upside down. The idea was that patriarchy becomes a little weaker and people have more equality in the society. Instead, we are ending up with this idea. So like I said, some of the ideas are not very strong. And the other thing is, care economy is a very expensive idea as such. For example, you must have heard of the word hospice care, which is basically people go and admit themselves into caring nursing environments where they will eventually die. Suppose they have a terminal disease or something like that. And it's a very, very expensive thing even in the West. So if you're going to talk about a hidden economy, who's going to pay for that? Now, this dilemma basically started off from something called the Beijing Platform Action in 1995, which pushed the idea that identifying and appreciating women's contributions in caregiving, domestic work, and volunteerism are necessary. So this is where the genesis of this idea is. Now, if you see, like I said, the demographic division in the country right now, there are 25.3% of the country is made up of children in the age group of 0 to 14, and 10.5% is over the age of 60. Now, by 2050, this is going to invert. We'll have 20.8% of the people who are going to be elderly and only 18% who are going to be children in the age group of 0 to 14. Basically, the country's population is going to age over a period of time because we have our lifespans have increased and we have better healthcare and everything. The reasons are fairly obvious. Now, what are the key issues related to care economy in India? High percentage outside workforce. Over half of India's women, that is what I said, 53% of women remain outside the workforce. In stark contrast, only 1.1% of men are outside the workforce. That is what I said, about half the people are not actually participating in the economic activities. Now, unpaid domestic and household work, according to India Periodic Labour Force for 23-24, around 36.7% of women and 19.4% of the workforce are involved in unpaid housework. Now, this is where I have a problem with this idea. This is not a sound idea. Nobody, if I clean my house, if I cook for myself, nobody is going to come and compensate me for that. So this classification is problematic. Now, there are gender disparities in domestic work. Of course, this is where we needed work actually, which says that 81% of the Indian females above the age of 6 spend more than 5 hours every day taking care of the home. Men are not actually participating in household work. This has to change. We cannot put a price tag on that because nobody is going to come and sweep my house and say, here, take 100 rupees for today. That's not going to happen. Now, caregiving time differences. Among those who are 6 years and older, 26.2% of females spend over 2 hours on daily caregiving versus 12.4% of males, which is to say there is a disproportionate number of men, disproportionate number of women who are spending more time taking care of those who have fallen ill. See, this is what happens across the world. When you fall ill, who takes care of you? Your mother does. Father goes off to work. Mothers, even if they're working mothers, maybe they have to take half a day off, or work from home. This is the gender roles that I was talking about. Very rare cases it happens that the fathers stay back at home and take care of the children, or somebody falls ill at home, some of the elderly, who's taking care of them? The mothers of the family, the women of the family. This is what needs to change. That is 26.6% of women and only 12.4% of men. So there's a stark disparity. Now, what are the key features of the national policy to increase the female workforce? Focus on care economy, direct care activities, indirect care activities like cooking, cleaning, other domestic services, broader services like healthcare, education, personal assistance, and caregiving infrastructure. This is what the government wants to do. Develop support structures to reduce the caregiving burden on women and encourage labor market participation. You must have heard there are creches and other things that are set up for women if they have a baby who's of a particular age. Many, if larger offices especially have place where the child can be left, the mother will be at work, she'll come continuously take care of the baby, then go back to work. So this happens in very large corporations. Then there is a core skilling package the government is talking of, specialized training program for caregivers, childcare for informal sector workers, childcare facilities especially for workers under the MNREGA will be a critical part of it. So this is what the government is planning. Now, what are the 5 pillars of the recommendations? Leave policies, better leave policies for maternal care and other care, subsidies for care services, investment care in infrastructure, skill training for care workers, and institutional mechanisms for quality assurances. So these are the 5 pillars on which this whole idea has been built. Now, what are the barriers for this? According to the ILO report, low education attainment, limited job opportunities, and inadequate infrastructure are some of the reasons that are keeping women out of the workforce. Then there are cultural norms around caregiving that heavily restrict women's labor market access. They also reinforce existing gender norms. Now, what are the existing initiatives for this? There is Palna scheme. The Ministry of Women and Child Development operates a scheme along with known as the Anganwadi cum creche facilities for children up to the age of over the age of 6 months and up to the age of 6 years. Now, what are the highlights of the scheme? They have nutritional support, they have health monitoring, immunization, and cognitive development programs. As of now, about 1,000 Anganwadi programs, 1,000 Anganwadi centers across the country are running this program. Now, coming back to the first idea that we started off with, that women are not participating in the workforce, and that has to be corrected. Let us revisit that idea. It's a very important idea, and it actually shows where we are as a country. Now, if you see, in 1990, 31% of the population, 31% of the female population in the country was participating in labor activities, was part of the labor force. By 2005, it went up to 33%. Okay? But you see in the next 15 years, it has fallen to 21%. Is it something unique to India? Actually, it's not. This follows a curve of development across the world. This is what we have seen. What happens is, initially there is an increase, it drops, then it goes up. This is how it is in terms of, if you have development, if we say this is economic development going along this axis, and this is labor participation. See, let us say this is how it is always. It's always like this. Let us say this is labor participation, women labor participation, women labor, and this is development, economic development. Now, what happens? See, this is what we are noticing here. So, we are somewhere around this part of the curve now. What happens is, initially when an economy is developing, women enter the workforce. Over a period of time, their participation drops, and then again it picks up. This is a global trend. This is not unique to India. We are not the only country to have seen this. Why does this happen? The reasons are fairly simple. As initial states, the kind of jobs that are available in the economy, a variety of educational attainments will open up those jobs to you. But culturally, what happens is, especially in countries like India, as people start to earn a little more money, they are reluctant to send out their women into working environments for a variety of reasons. Now, this happens again across the world, but once our development increases as a country, what happens is, along with this, the educational attainment of women improves and the gendered norms start to weaken. Then what happens? Women again start rejoining the workforce, and your women labor force participation rates again go up. It's just a play of economic factors and cultural norms. That's an interplay of factors. Only thing that changes in this particular curve is, suppose there is an economic crisis, then more women again join the workforce. For example, this happened in a few countries in the West. For example, it happened in the US when factories were shut down around what is called the Rust Belt Especially there's a study that was carried out in Pittsburgh. When factories were shut down, women actually came out and joined the workforce to keep the families going. That is the only thing that changes. If there is an economic crisis, women rejoin the workforce. Otherwise, this is a perfectly normal thing, and what we are going to see is women will again join once their educational attainment becomes better, the cultural norms change, gendered roles change, and then we'll be back to having high women participation. What we want as a country, what the government wants as a country is that we have the experience of the developed world. For example, in countries like Belarus, Bulgaria and Sweden, they have lower proportions of women outside the economic activities, which is less than 10%. Less than 10% of the women are outside the labor force, which is what our country wants to achieve, and we will get to there. It's just a question of the developmental curve. Now, the other thing in terms of care economy, they are saying that early childhood care and education are essential, and this will actually also help in the care economy. So, this is what this idea is about. While the idea is fascinating, the idea of care economy is fascinating, there are certain problems with it. And in terms of female labor force participation, there's a lot of hand-wringing that's going on, but that just shows that the country is developing and the curve will again correct itself. Okay, now let us discuss no detention policy. Center scraps no detention policy for classes 5 and 8. This is a new idea that has been changed, that has come in, and let us understand this. Earlier, after the right to education was passed and an amendment was passed and the right to education was brought in, what happened was that one of the ideas that was brought in was till 8th class at least, everybody must get an education. And one of the ideas that came in pursuit of this goal was to scrap away the idea of detaining people or failing people in a particular class. Now the government is saying that let us do away with that idea. I want you to remember one particular idea before we start this discussion, because we're going to end this topic with that. The idea I want you to remember is called cultural capital. This is a very, very important idea. This is an idea that has been formulated by a French sociologist, social philosopher called Pierre Bourdieu. Okay, I want you to remember this phrase and this idea. We'll discuss this when we end this topic, because this idea has great relevance to this topic. And should a question like this appear, be sure to use that phrase. Now, what the government is saying is that the idea is now that for classes 5 and 8, where we were not earlier detaining people, not failing people, now we are going to fail them. Now, this includes over 3,000 centrally run schools, including Kendriya Vidyalayas, Navodaya Vidyalayas, Sainik schools and Ekalavya model schools. And the idea is that there should be accountability in terms of educational attainment. But before we start this idea, we have to start, let us ask a basic question. What were the reasons which forced the government to actually have this policy of no detention? In 2009, we had the Right to Education Act passed, and this idea was formulated that we'll have no detentions, no failures. Whatever those causes were, have they been fulfilled? That those causes are no longer relevant? Are all those factors still at play and we are neglecting them? So this is an important question to ask, and keep that in mind. Okay. Now, the idea is now to improve learning outcomes and accountability while balancing the rights of the students with academic standards. Like I said, the Right to Education Act was in 2009, was amended in 2019, which allowed the appropriate government to decide whether somebody could be failed or they could be passed. I mean, the government now gets to call whether you're a good student or maybe you're not. That's what it is. Now, these changes have been adopted since 2019. 18 states and union territories, including Delhi, Rajasthan, and Tamil Nadu, have accepted the idea that we will fail our students, perfectly fine by us. And pending decisions, Haryana and Puducherry are yet to decide. And the states that have continuing with will not fail our kids, that is no detention policy, those states are Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Maharashtra, and some of the other states. Now, reasons for scrapping the policy. There was a criticism that the academic standards are being diluted. And experts argued that the policy led to a decline in the academic standards and student accountability was falling. Now, it was believed that schools have just become midday hubs for midday meals. Children are coming, eating, staying till the class of 8, but they're not learning anything. And the government has suggested that states take a call on whether they want to change this policy. While schools that are run by the center, they've already made a change. Now, what are the state and expert advocacy saying? By 2016, most of the states actually supported the policy of scrapping the policy during a Central Advisory Board of Education meeting. So, 2016 itself, many states said that we want to end this no detention policy. And the National Education Policy emphasized improved learning outcomes when it comes to educational attainment. So, after 2020, we had the National Education Policy, the new one. Now, balancing accountability with equity. The idea is that we have to have a sense of seriousness in students when it comes to learning. Now, what are the key provisions of the policy? Students failing the examination will be allowed to take the examination again after a period of 2 months. That is the first change that has been made. And failure in re-examination will lead to a detention. Now, there will be competency-based evaluations. Examination will focus on holistic development rather than rote memorization or procedural skills. In fact, we've had in one of our previous discussions, we have discussed this continuous evaluation model that is being implemented across the country. So that if it is implemented, it would actually be very, very effective and will not have a problem with actually failure rates. Now, there will be support for struggling students. There will be safeguards for students. No student can be expelled from a child before completing class 8. Detailed records of detained students and their progress will be maintained. Now, this is actually a little funny, this idea that till you complete class 8, you will not be expelled from school. Are we saying that a 70-year-old man is going to continue studying? There has to be some better idea than that. How many times are you going to fail a child? Now, what are the reactions towards the new policy? The supporters say that educators are applauding the idea that it's a step towards academic rigor and preparing students for real-world challenge. I really don't agree with this idea of academic rigor when you're talking about children. We're talking about school kids. These are not scholars who are doing their PhDs or people who are publishing their papers. We're talking about children. They're delicate, they're sensitive, and planting the idea that they are failures so early in life is a very, very bad idea. So this idea of the academics, the educators, that this is basically a fear-based model where you scare a child into learning something, and fear never really leads to good outcomes. So I'm actually, you might say, I'm completely opposed to this idea because it's again not on sound footing. What are the parents are saying? They're saying it's a means to encourage better academic preparation outcomes. Again, these are very urban perspectives. In rural India, the ideas actually are quite different. Critics, what are the critics saying? Detentions will increase dropout rates and undermine the RTE's goal of inclusive education. Absolutely. A child who fails, the parents will have less of an incentive to keep the child at school. They think anyway the child is failing, let us put him to work or put her to work. And especially if it's a girl who's failing, I don't think she's getting a second chance in this country, especially in, say, rural India or some backward part of the country. The critics also highlight the need for integrating continuous and comprehensive evaluation with the policy. Like I said, CC, if it comes in, then the problem of failure, a problem of detention completely takes a different turn, because then we have a continuous evaluation model. It's not a one exam that you have to pass. And then because child is being evaluated on a continuous mode throughout the year, it becomes, unless the child is not coming to school, it will be very difficult to actually fail the school, because then the teacher is also responsible. What are the recommendations? Early identification of at-risk students to reduce failures, focus on addressing learning gaps throughout the academic year, implementation of schools heads to monitor progress and ensure adequate support for detained students. Holistic policy should this policy should be together with the continuous evaluation model. Now also, let us, since we are talking, one of the biggest problems with this idea is that it will lead to dropouts, that we'll have, actually children will have a lower literacy rate over a period of time, if nothing else. Forget social mobility, basic literacy rates may fall. So for understanding that, let us see how are the dropout rates in the country. Like I said, this no detention policy creates a sense of fear in the children. Now coming back to dropout rates, this is the data we are using from 20 and 21. Overall in India, the dropout rate among children after class 10, till and after class 10 is 16.9%, almost 17%. It's highest in Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and Assam. And as you can see, the northeastern states have a very high rate of dropout. Meghalaya has 39%, Tripura has 35%, and Sikkim has 25%. About, this is to say, nearly nearly 1/4 of the students are dropping out. And Ladakh and Jammu Kashmir have lower percentages. And as you can see, the data clearly shows that the dropout rates are fairly high. The latest data, there is another data that shows that, now there are two sources of data, I am giving you both. One shows that dropout rate was 12.6% in 2021 and 22, which is a substantial improvement from 2020 to 21. And dropout rates, if we go by grade, this is for the entire, from class 1 to class 10. Secondary school, it is 12.6%, upper primary it is 3%, primary it is 1.5%. And if you see state-wise map of children who are actually getting enrolled in schools, totally it is about 72.9%. That should be 100%. Again, the South does better than the other states. Now, state-wise percentage of children enrolled, the change, this is what it is. Overall, there is an improvement in 7.3% in terms of children who have enrolled in schools. And if we see the dropout rates in the schools, this is how it is. In the states, this is how it is. And how is it among girl children? If we talk of girl children, primary school in 2017-2018, it was 3.3%. By 2021, it has come down to 0.7%. Upper primary, it is 5.6% to 2.6%. Now we are saying basically, then secondary, it is 18.4% to 13.7%. So if we emphasize on the no detention policy being scrapped, this is the number that is actually going to go up. And that is where actually you begin to change lives. Now, gross enrollment ratios, as you can see, primary, it is higher. When you see it's more than 103%, what it effectively means is sometimes we talk of an age group, the total number of children in that age group. Sometimes people from higher age bracket may also join that. So that's where we get 103%. It's not a calculation error. Okay. Now, what are the reasons for dropping out of school and college? Financial constraints, 21%. Not interested in education, 19%. Economic activities, 18%. Domestic chores, 15%. Marriage, 5%. Unable to cope, failure in studies is 3%. Now, this can go up actually. This can actually go up. Now, what are the pros and cons of this idea? Very quickly, the pros are promotes inclusive education. If we have a no detention policy, what are the advantages to that? Reduces stress and anxiety, All of you have gone through education. What's the biggest fear you had as a child, as a student? It's a fear of failure. We are reintroducing that into the education system. Now, promotes inclusive education by supporting slower learners. Again, the idea is that we have, the way education system is structured, we have the same kind of teaching for all the students, knowing fully well that all our students learn in different ways. They learn at different rates. Some children will take longer to learn. So we have to give them that time. If we have no detention policy, it allows children to cope up earlier. And there is a very important factor that comes into play. When we talk of school enrollments, it's always from, say, there's a cutoff date. Let us say generally it is the 31st August or 31st of July or something. So in the previous year, a child is born on 31st August, 31st June, is eligible, till then they're eligible, all the way from the previous years. Now, what this effectively means is there's a gap between the youngest child and the oldest child in a school. There's a gap of almost 1 year because of the way the year is calculated. A year's cognitive development that has real outcomes when it comes to learning, because our minds develop differently depending on our age, especially when we are children. Our developmental patterns are different, which is where it is important not to have a no detention policy, because you have to give that gap. So the child who's the youngest will find it very difficult to understand something because the child's mind has not developed yet. Child who was the oldest, again because he was cut off from let us say a child is born in December, has an advantage of about 7 months or 8 months. The child actually has that much time to develop. The mind has had that much extra time to develop, which is where the idea of slow learners and the idea of no detention comes to play. Okay, reduces socioeconomic barriers to education, because once a child fails, there's less of an incentive for the child of a poor person, less of a possibility of the child of a poor person to stay in education. If there is no idea of failure, then the child continues. Now, encourages holistic development rather than just academic learning. We all know that academic learning is only one part of mental development. Now, supports first generation learners. This is the idea I was talking about. When I said cultural capital, what cultural capital effectively means is that there are many things that we learn without putting an effort when we are in a particular family. And what our families teach us, what we learn from our parents, grandparents, is the outcome of their own education, their own attainments in life, their own exposure to life. So a child of a businessman would learn business tactics without actually trying to learn it, because those are the ideas that are being discussed at home. Child of an academic will learn ideas very quickly. Now, the child of a laborer, if the child is a first-time learner, that is where first-generation learners have a huge gap. Who helps the child with homework? What kind of ideas is the child being exposed to? That is where things change. That is where no detention policy actually made sense. Now, also reduces economic burden on families in terms of grade retention, because now the family has to support the child for one additional year. Now, what are the disadvantages to this no detention policy? Suppose we have a no detention policy in place. What are the disadvantages? Leads to poor learning outcomes, as there's no fear of learning. Learning must be, I don't really agree with this. Learning must be a joyful experience. The learning paradigm has to change, and learning must be a joyful experience. If it is a joyful experience, then there's no fear of failure. Fear of failure and joy of learning don't go together. Creates challenges in maintaining academic standards. Students might lack motivation to study seriously. Teachers face difficulty in maintaining classroom discipline, does not address the root cause of learning difficulties, creates problems at higher education levels due to weak foundation. Actually, that's a valid idea, that children are just going through school, through classes, without actually learning anything. They will immediately fail when they get to a higher grade. So that part of it is actually a completely valid point for scrapping no detention policy. if the foundation of the children in terms of their learning skills is not strong, then it becomes the biggest barrier to actually gain any kind of meaningful education. Now, might not prepare students adequately for competitive exams later in life. That is also actually a valid idea. So these are the disadvantages to no detention policy. Now the country has tried no detention policy for a while, and now we have scrapped it, and hopefully the education system as such, in terms of the kind of schools we have, in terms of the kind of teachers we have, kind of exposure the children have, all this will improve over a period of time, and the very idea that children have to fail or will fail will become irrelevant, and hopefully this policy helps the children become better learners. So that's it. Thank you very much and best of luck. This was the very last episode of Recital Social Issues, and very best to all of you for your future examinations. Thank you very much.